Welcome back, guys. So in this video I'm going to be talking about error handling. Error handling is as important as your application features. Yes, in that if you do not catch or check the right errors, you might end up really putting your application in a very bad state. Okay, so there are, let's say you are carrying out multiple operations, and these operations are interdependent, and let's say it's something that will take you 3 steps to complete, and maybe you have an error in step 2, and if you do not catch and handle the error at step 2, moving on to step 3 could, cause something that you may not like. So it could be an anomaly somewhere in your program. So this is just a very basic idea of why it's actually important that you handle your errors. Well, I think the more importantly, handling errors gracefully is mostly for your users. Okay, errors will tell you when your server is down. Errors will tell you when something is not right. Errors will tell you when users are having some difficulties accessing some parts of your code. Okay, so that's why it's actually really important that you catch your errors. Have things like proper logging and monitoring, integrate monitoring tools like a Datadog or maybe Elasticstack. Those things would help you, monitor your errors, and you know when to react if something really goes wrong, and your users do not have to hate you for not giving them a better service. Okay, so there's a good proverb that says, don't just check errors, handle them gracefully. Okay, so I think this actually applies to everything in software development. You have to check your errors and make sure you take care of them as you should. All right, so how does Go handle errors? um Okay, first of all, there's an error interface. I think you've probably, I'm not sure we've done anything where we've used this, but we're going to do some very basic operations where we use these errors and see how what is idiomatic, in the idiomatic way of handling errors in Go. So we have the error interface, and the error interface just has a one function signature. Okay, so that's one thing. You will see this in a lot of Go code. Yeah, a lot of functions would you see functions that return maybe an error if something goes wrong, or something like that, or functions that return multiple values. One of them is usually an error value, so that the consumer of your functions can actually check for an error and then they're able to use it. Okay, so it's yeah, so that's that. And there is also an errors package. So errors package is a package that comes from that's in part of the Go standard library. It has a new function that helps you create a new instance of an you know of an error interface. Okay, so let's actually use this in code so that you see how it works. All right, so we are going to write a very small program that that will basically export all of our Facebook feeds to an external file, so maybe a text file, and we just export all the feeds to that file. So let's do that. And already down here, I've already defined a function signature of for export function. So it's going to take our it's going to get social media interface, and yeah, and then return an error. Yeah, so this is an error interface. So if there's any error, we expect this function to return an error type. Okay, all right, so do know that there you could go ahead and do this even before you watch me do it, and you can even move this into the FB package and just play around just to test your knowledge. Okay, so let's get to work. All right, so go ahead and define an error. We'll call the export function, and then pass in the FB, which it satisfies the social media interface, so this shouldn't be a problem. And now we're going to handle our error. So to handle this error, we can check if this error is not nil. So what this means is if there is no error. Okay. Oh, so yeah, sorry. Yeah, what this means if there is an error. So if not nil. So this is the same thing as a not equal to. This is just an exclamation mark and an equal sign. So if it is not nil, we're going to go ahead and print. Or maybe you'll panic. So panic will just crash the program, just stop the program from running. Okay. So now panicking is actually very, very sensitive. You should know when to use it and when not to use it. In this case, it's fine for me to use panic because this is our program. I mean, this is a binary. We are literally running a binary. It's not a package. So in a package, you shouldn't really panic in a package, right? Or unless it's really critical for you to do that. So you should be a bit more reserved when it comes to using the panic, because panic just stops the whole Go process from running. All right. Yeah. If you're writing a package, I will advise you to gracefully handle your errors by checking for them and then returning it so that the consumer of your package can decide what to do with your error. So this is best practices. All right. So let's quickly implement our export function. So we're going to start by opening a file and creating it if it doesn't exist. So we're going to use the OS package. So the OS package has a function called open file, right? So what this does is it opens the file and gets to the handle of the file. So it's also known as the file descriptor. So a file descriptor is it's actually low level. You know, it's very low level, and I wouldn't want to get into the meat of that. So maybe you could Google it and see what it actually means. So a file descriptor is more like a handle that gives you access to writing or reading a file, and in the operating system's file system. Okay, so I'm on a Linux, so Go knows how to get a file descriptor from the operating system and gives me access to doing whatever I want to do with that. So we're going to call this file fb data. It's going to be a text file, txt. Okay. So the second parameter that this function takes is called flags. All right. So there are different kinds of flags. So this is yet again another low-level operating system-based terms. Okay. So there is it's something called o_create. So this is Linux-based stuff. So this is Linux based. I don't know what it's called. All right, but the last time I checked, so it's very. I think it's something that has to do with the C API. Okay, so you know that the Linux kernel is written in C. So the C API exposes some sort of system calls that makes it possible for you to create files or to edit them, from your code. Okay, so this is the way that Go represents this API, this Linux's API. So we want to create the file. So that's what this sending means. We want the operating system to create the file if it does not exist. So after creating the file, we also want the permission to write to this file. All right. So we're going to use write only. So if I hover over it, you should see the definition. It said flags open file wrapping those on sorry. It didn't actually write exactly what this does. Yeah, so as you can see, open the file, write only. So we don't want to read, we just want to write to the file. So that's why I'm passing this flag to this function. If we wanted to read and write at the same time, we use this flag. Okay, read and write. All right. So the first flag is to create the file if it does not exist. The second flag is to write to the file. All right. So now the last parameter is something called permissions. So I'm not going to explain this too. It's still something that has to do with Linux, and Go has a way to actually unify all of these things across Windows and Linux system. So yeah, so this should also work in your Windows machine. Okay. In case if it doesn't work or if you have any problem with that, you can send me a message on Twitter or anywhere you can find me. Yeah. So now this should open our file in read-only. So now let's handle the error. So the first thing we do is to check if there is an error. So we'll do there's something I call defensive programming. So instead of saying if error, do something. Okay, I usually prefer to use if not error. All right. So if the error is not equal to nil, which can still translate to if error. Yeah. Sorry. If the error is not nil, that means that an error has occurred when you were trying to open this file. So we can go ahead and do what? Return. We're not going to panic this time. I'm going to return error. Okay. So now, if there is no error, we want to go ahead and write to this file. So we're just going to use the for loop. So we're going to loop through the feeds, which is u.feed. Yep. And through the feed, and then range. We're going to call this fd, which is feed. Now we're going to use the file descriptor to write to our file. So we're going to call that n. So we use f, which is our file descriptor, we use the write function. So there are a couple of other functions here. So you can use the write string or write at, which you can select, which makes it possible for you to select a position where you want to write your data. So the write function takes an array of bytes. So to convert our feed to bytes, we'll simply use the byte function, the inbuilt byte function, call it on the fd. So because I want to print a new line after each feed, I just go ahead and concatenate a new line to our feed. So now that's the next thing to do. We check our errors. So if it's not equal to nil, go ahead and return that error. Okay, so now everything works well. I'm just going to go ahead and print a simple feedback that tells us that everything went well. So we can just go ahead and say, use the printf, say wrote. So what this write function will return is the number of bytes that was written. Okay, so it's written here. It returns the number of bytes written and an error. Okay, so we know that we're getting a digits. So let's say bytes. Now remember from my earlier video where I talked about bits and bytes. So remember, every single ASCII character is 1 byte. Okay, so a single letter or a character like this F, for example, is 1 byte. All right, so that's that. Okay, so now if everything goes well, then we know that we didn't have an error. Just go ahead and return nil. Okay, so why do I keep doing this? So this should be fd. Okay, so everything looks good. All right, so let me just walk through the code again. We open the file in write only mode, create it if it does not exist, and then check if there's an error when you are trying to open the file. If there is no error, go ahead and loop through all of our feed and then write it to this file, fb data, and return nil at the end. Okay, so let's quickly run our code and see. Okay, so seems to go well. We'll check our file system. As you can see, the feeds file has been created, fb data, and there we go. Our Facebook feeds has been written to the console. Okay, just you can see how good this. You see how interfaces can really be lovely. So let's create another Twitter, another type. So use Twitter. So new, go ahead and import that. Oh, come on, the Twitter. Yeah, so you can also go ahead and export Twitter instead. So yeah, that's maybe you could even do something like edit this function to take a different name. In fact, actually let me do it here. So call this file name. All right, and yeah, file name. So just going to go ahead and duplicate this, check this FB, remove this, save that. So we'll come here and change this, our function signature, to take the name of our file, which is going to be a string type. Okay, so just pass this in here on this file name. All right, and everything is looking good. So I'm just going to change this to fb data.txt. This should be fb data.txt. This should be Twitter data. Okay, so right now the way this thing is set, it's going to replace all the data in here. It's not going to append to it or add it on the next line. There's a way to do that. I will leave that up to you to figure out, but let's go ahead and run this code right now and see what we get. And everything looks to have worked, so let's check. Yeah, as you can see, FB data is here and Twitter data too has been exported to a file. All right, so this is just a basically how errors work in Go, and I added these links. I added this link to the notes so you can read it up. And Dave Cheney is actually it's a known authority in the Go community, and he has some really nice blog posts on his blog, so you can check him out and learn as much as you can. Okay, so that's that for error handling, and in the next video we're going to dive into Go routines, channels, and sync. That's concurrency. See you then.